Wix Studio, one end-to-end web creation platform for your agency to deliver exceptional work with absolute efficiency.
The #1 long-form writer that helps SEOs outrank competition at the click of a button using real-time research and NLP. Start ranking content today with contentatScale.ai.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. So just to put that introduction into context, the CEO part of my career, that's 2 weeks. The SEO part, that's 13 years. So the context is there. And let's get started. So when building an automated content strategy, there are a bunch of details I would love to go into, but we have 20 minutes today. So we have made a blog post at voxeltool.io/Brighton2023, where you can find JavaScripts and stuff like that for if you want to do this yourselves. So before we get started, just when working with automation, which as an agency we do a lot because we want to save time and be more flexible, scalable, working with more clients and so on. I think one of the challenges that we found when trying to automate stuff was that we tried to solve different kinds of automation the same way. And when thinking more about this, we found that breaking down the strategy into different parts, like a reactive automation workflow, a proactive, a preemptive, and so on, really helped us to sort of navigate this in a better way. So these are going to be the sections for today's talk. And this is the preferred tool stack that we have went with for this session. And hopefully you recognize a few of the tools over there. Let's dive into it. Reactive. This is the part basically acting after something has occurred. And for this workflow, we want to set up a scheduled Screaming Frog crawl. So this is going to be a quite practical session on this topic. And yeah, so go to Screaming Frog, find your crawl, set that up, connect the following APIs. So you can do the ones you prefer. We went with Ahrefs, Analytics, and Search Console. And this is what the file looks like. And I guess most of you know, but the green part, that's Screaming Frog data. Then we have Google Analytics data, Search Console data, and Ahrefs data. And what we want to do next is to look at this file and define our filter criteria. And what I mean by that is essentially anything in the file that might be relevant to you that you want to get notified about in this case. It can be conversions, referring domains, and depending on which sources you have included via API, that may vary. And one thing when thinking about the metrics, I think it's important to make sure that they make sense to compare on a weekly basis, so from 1 week to another. And what we want to do next is a Google Apps script. And this is essentially a huge JavaScript. You can find it to just copy-paste it in the blog post, so you don't have to do it yourselves. And our tech guy has been kind enough to leave comments as well throughout the JavaScript, so you know and understand where to edit it. But what this Google Apps script does is essentially that it reads our latest crawl and compare it to our previous crawl, and it basically summarizes the insights in an email for us. So this is the end of the first reactive workflow, which I think it resonates really well with me, at least, being a consultant, having multiple clients, a few of them on more than 10 markets. So there are quite a lot to keep your tabs on, and having this workflow and know that every week I'm served with an email that basically has all the criteria I have defined, just listing it for me so I can skim through it and I can make a decision with my expertise based on what I know about the client, whether or not we should act on it. So, and yeah, you can include Ahrefs data in internal links and basically anything that you find relevant from the crawl. So I think this is a quite nice way of managing that. Still within the reactive workflow, but a completely separate workflow, is real-time monitoring. And I don't know how many of you uses this today. For this, we use Content King. And I've worked as a consultant for 9 years. So obviously there was a time prior to Content King, and I don't know how we managed. It's like having this like set up properly is the best kind of insurance I can come to think of. That I find super valuable. But when setting it up, I think that's where a lot of my colleagues and so on make it, doesn't take the time to make a proper setup, if that makes sense. So I think when doing this, it really makes sense to try to define your page types, your markets, if it's a .com site, and so on, to make sure that the alerts make sense, because not all alerts are equally important. So in my case, for example, when it's alerts related to our category pages, which in our case, or in this case is our preferred landing pages, I get an email, which is how I like it. But in the case they are not as important or crucial, they just go straight into a Slack channel. So really like defining the alerts makes sense for me, at least, to know that if they go into Slack, that's nice to know. If they come by email, it's neat to know, and I better make sure to read my Content King emails. So this is another part of the workflow which I think is really valuable when working with content, and especially as a consultant, when clients may do changes that you want to sort of like keep track on, because they don't always communicate everything to us. That's two ways for the reactive workflow, and you can add multiple streams here as well, include other APIs in your crawls to sort of like get the level of detail that you want. But it's a part of the strategy. The other one is the preemptive part, and this is essentially taken as a measure against something possible. And this one might be a bit controversial because it comes down to like spying on your competitors via Content King in this case. So I started to play around with this like a year ago or so, and I find it quite valuable. However, you should be mindful with this, and whether it should be a best practice might be something you should align on internally. But just having like a super small crawl running in the middle of the night, just making sure that you get notified when competitors, for example, shifts a lot internal links to a new campaign. For example, Black Friday, you can just, you get that alert, you can call up your client and say, hey guys, our competitors are starting to focus on Black Friday, maybe we should too. So those kind of like trying to be preemptive in these cases and act before our competition, essentially. It can also be like if they add body content to the category pages. It could be one of those as well, that then we might want to keep track of that. That was the only thing really in the preemptive workflow. There are more to that as well if you want to, but as I said, just be mindful when setting up crawls on your competitors' websites. The next part is the proactive one, and this is essentially taking steps in advance to seize opportunities. And here I think this might sound like, of course, but in this case, keywords really are the backbone of our strategy. Here, I think it's really important, if you want to build a good foundation, to compile a lot of keyword data. And there are numerous times that I like take over a client and I see what they have worked with previously, and there are like 400 keywords there. And in this case, I mean a lot of data. So go to your different sources, whether that's Google Search Console, Ahrefs, Google Ads, preferably all of them, but make sure to get data from all those sources and be creative. You can workshop around this with your clients, or if you're in-house, with your colleagues as well. Also, if you have internal search engines, for example, make sure to leverage the data you can find there to like really build as good a foundation as possible. The next thing we want to do is what we've always done, merge files and start VLOOKUP. Well, not really, not in this case. In this case, we are gonna conduct our research in Voxel. That's at least what I did. And of course, I'm biased. It's a product of ours. But I think it's a really nice way to do keyword research. And what Voxel does is basically challenging the workflow that a lot of us do in Excel or Google Sheets, and make it a lot more efficient. What we want to do when we have added all the keywords from different sources, in Voxel is to perform additional deep dives. And these deep dives can be, it should be on your priority keywords, and whether that's your products with the highest profit margin, take the keywords associated to that and run them through long tail. People also ask, and so on and so on, but try to really make sure that for your most important keywords and topics, you should really do extended research to make sure that you really get the full spectra in your keyword portfolio. When applicable, there isn't always a case for this, but when it is, I think it's definitely worth doing. So programmatic SEO research, a lot of our clients are e-commerce. If they have, for example, a product feed, just grab that product feed and take the different aspects that you can find in the product feed that are relevant to you and combine the searches and see what comes out. In this case, I think initially I had 30,000 keywords or something like that in my keyword research project, and despite having that many keywords, I got additionally 15,000 keywords with search volume, which is a nice one. But then when we have that many keywords, I think it's important to make the keywords make sense, and that essentially comes down to keyword clustering. And there are ways you can do it. You can do it manually, you can do it semi-automatically or fully automatically. I prefer the fully automatic way, which is essentially you decide the criteria. For example, you can see over there, how many URLs to consider, and so on, to make sure that you get the clustering automated based on the SERP similarity on your chosen criteria. And what this essentially gives us is topics. And so we cluster a bunch of keywords together, they became topics, and that's essentially what we want to own. So having a nice workflow to produce those sort of clear topical lanes is important. And to take it one step further, of course, we can automate this the full way. So with literally a click of a button, we can have a complete content plan with the said actions that you can see here, 552 URLs to optimize, 1252 URLs that we probably should create if we want visibility on these keywords, and close to 1,000 URLs that are okay. And just to put it into a little bit of context, because I think what Voxel has done is to streamline a bunch of different stuff we usually do in other tools to save time. And in this case, it took me less than 4 hours to conduct a 45,000 keyword research project that is clustered and have a complete content plan to it, which I think is quite efficient. And for those interested, and if you work with content and stuff like that, you can draft content here as well. I think one of those is the one above there, is the context prompt, which essentially is a prompt for you to provide your brand guidelines, what you want to be associated with or de-associated with, and so on, to really make sure that the output is in line with your expectations, so to speak. And the content prompt is more what you type is what you get, sort of thing. But what I think is important here as well is notice the brackets, the primary keyword and secondary keywords there. This allows you to do this at scale. So you can select 50 URLs that you want to create, click a button, and then you have content drafts for that. So that's quite a streamlined workflow, which I think is quite nice. This is just an example of the output. But there are a bunch of brilliant tools out there, and I use a lot of them, Ahrefs being one that I for sure couldn't live without. So I think it's important that you can do this whole workflow that I just showed you in this way as well. So you can research your keywords using Keyword Planner or Keyword Tool IO, for example, and you can organize them in SEMrush, which is a quite new feature there, or Keyword Insights. And you can create your plan in Sheets or Excel, and you can draft your content. So there are ways to do this. I just find it nice to have everything in one place. So some of the key takeaways. I think the number one thing that I want you guys to take away from here is to really, like, when thinking about automation, to define your needs and think about the processes and which steps you should automate. And this ties back to like my very first slide in the beginning, the strategy breakdown, because for me, it really makes sense to break down the automation strategy in these parts. There are other parts as well that you could do. There are probably better ways to do it as well. I'm not saying that this is the right way, it's a way. But I think when trying to like automate your workflows, this is one way you could put it into brackets. The other one is common sense prevails. Don't let automation replace thinking, trust your skills. And for me, I think this one is a nice one if we go back to the first workflow in reactive, where we have the screaming frog crawl with the attached APIs, and the output is essentially an email in my inbox. And that one, I think, that resonates really well with me, because in a lot of cases, I don't like tools making an A or B decision about my clients that I think that I should be making, since it's my expertise, my competency, what I know about the client that should really go into that decision, not our A or B sort of thing. So I think it's important to, like, even though there are a lot of really cool and amazing tools out there, and you can automate a lot of your work, like leaving the decision up to us, I think, that, at least for me, that resonates really well to some extent. The last one is tool assessment. This one I think most of us do have a good process for. However, I think, at least in my case or our case, the problem is that we don't consistently stick to it. There are, with ChatGPT and all the other tools coming out there all the time, I think like having a good process and really sticking to it can really make a difference, especially if you're an agency as we are, and having like 25 people, like a great tool does make a difference. And automating workflows does too, so finding that like perfect combination is something I think could be worth putting more time into consistently. That's what I had for you guys today. So thank you so much for listening and having me. And you will find me by the right over here after the other speakers, and then later on by the voxel stand. And if you would like to connect with me, I would love for you to do that. It would be amazing. So please do, Daniel Axelsson on LinkedIn, or just scan that one. And as I mentioned, this whole presentation with its associated like automation workflows and stuff like that is completely broken down in a blog post. So for those of you who took notes, it was probably unnecessary. You could just visit the blog post instead and have everything there. Thank you so much.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.